for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Nice.
Thanks, Nick. That was festive. Welcome, everybody, once again to another exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. This week, we've got a special treat for you as we take a break in our ethics studies with Witten Swan. We've got, for the very first time on Victory Never Sleeps, good friend of mine, longtime friend of mine, Gothi Bodi Mayo, joining us for the very first time on Victory Never Sleeps. So welcome, Bodi.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, top of the show stuff. We are coming to you live on Entropy, YouTube, VK, Twitter, Odyssey, Rumble, and Twitch. You're welcome to ask questions on any of those platforms if you find yourself there. We've got folks monitoring all of those, and this is a viewer participation program, so all your questions are welcome. If you would like to do any super chats where you can get your questions to the front of the line, monetize those, we have instructions on how to do that on the description of this video. If you guys would like to leave us a tip to help support us and get little flashy noise making things happening on the screen, you can do that there also. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you guys' generosity. It's helping us a lot on our progress towards Phrasehoff as well as other things. We appreciate it. I should mention, coming up in February, and Nick can throw the link and the dates up, we have Charming of the Plow at Njordshof. That is the showcase event at Njordshof every year. This is going to be the second annual one, and it's going to be amazing. I'll be down there, and I look forward to seeing you guys there. If you're a member, talk to your folk builder if you need any help and instructions on that, and they'll be happy to get you set up. If you're not a member, you can also reach out to the local folk builder or any of our folk builders or Gothar, and we can get that squared away from you. We would love to have you give us a visit. Also, if you're not a member and you're hearing the sound of my voice on this, assuming that you are one of our folk, we would love to have you consider joining the Asatru Folk Assembly. We're doing awesome things. We're doing important things. And we would love to have you do those things with us and share in that. It's a really exciting time to be Asatru. We've got amazing things going on, and we're at a stage in our development where every individual can make a huge difference. So yeah, if you hear this and you're thinking about it, go to one of our websites, check us out, and consider joining. And that said, as of today, we have the new and improved Njordshof website up and running. Folk builder Lydia Phelps has been putting in work to make our websites even more functional, and on top of that, to look a lot better and a lot fancier. So check that out. If you don't know what district you find yourself in, you're listening to the program, we have a map that kind of breaks down which, what area is in which district. I invite you to check out any of our Hoff websites. They got contact information as well as calendars and other useful stuff there to help get you involved. Whether you can or you can't make it to Njordshof for Charming of the Plow, we would also invite you the following month in March to attend Ostara at Thorshoff. Njordhoff is in White Springs, Florida, and Thorshoff is in Linden, North Carolina. I'll be at both of those events. We would love to see you guys there. If you need help or assistance getting that figured out, please talk to your local folk builder. And with that, Bodi, can you introduce yourself to folks and tell people about how you found Asatru generally and what brought you to the Asatru Folk Assembly?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. That's a tall order. We'll start with the introduction first. I am Gothi Bodi Mayo. I am from, at present, Southwest Georgia by way of East Alabama and further north in here, West Georgia. True certified son of the South. Family's been here for a long, long, long time. We're the honkies that settled this part of the world, in case you didn't know. As far as how I came to Asatru, I was just speaking with my Go to Our program student about that. It's been 23 years now. Mother's Night of 2001. That was the culmination of about, I think, a year of the last year of kind of soul searching. Knew Christianity wasn't for me at an early age. Kind of floated around as, I guess, what you would call an atheist for, I guess, my teen years and my early 20s. Dabbled a little bit in the neo-pagan scene, realized that was an exercise in mass dementia. Kind of dropped that. But I ran into an Asatruer who styled himself as a Gothi because there was no AFA, there was no church yet. And he's the one that kind of brought me home. And 23 years ago on Mother's Night, we had back then what was called a profession of faith, where I literally in bloat forswore all ties and allegiances and binds to Christianity and all that, and swore that I would follow the gods forever. So here we are.
So, flag on the play. There was, in fact, an AFA then.
For me, there wasn't.
That's one of the interesting things about that period in our history. There was an AFA, but it was almost exclusively in California. And
right.
There was scattered members around the country, but pretty much all the activity and certainly the focus of it was out on the West Coast at that time.
Yeah, we knew nothing about the AFA was a California thing in 2001.
If you look at our membership map today, you never would have thunk it, because the, I guess, center of gravity as far as weight of members go has moved substantially east since then.
Yep.
So we've got a couple of questions. The first one here so far from folk builder Jason Gallagher. Good evening, Gothi Mayo. Can you talk about how you got the name Bodi and the tradition of giving, quote unquote, heathen names in certain groups back in the day? Hail the AFA.
Yeah. Hey, Jason. Thanks. Not a lot of people know that. It is a strange world I walk of names. So my legal name, which you can easily see on the database if you are privy to it, is Matthew. Everybody at work calls me Matt. Of course, I know some of you watching this may be shocked to know that that is not my actual government name. But 20 some odd years ago, it was the fashion to take a quote unquote heathen name. And so that first Gothi that I ever knew, his name was Craig. Craig asked me if I'd like to do that as part of my profession of faith. It was an option. I could just stay Matthew Mayo, or I could, take on a heathen name. And it was very much the fashion. But at the time, a lot of these, at least a lot of the dudes who were taking heathen names, they were just this impossible, long drawn out, hard to say, even for Scandinavian kind of names. And this guy, Craig, actually, put some heart and some thought into it. And so Bodi, and it's important to note here that my good friend Craig is a little bit has spelling issues, a little bit of dyslexia, grammar issues, doesn't always really spell things correctly. And so Bodi is actually supposed to be spelled with 2 D's instead of 1. But Craig forgot that, just left me with the 1. So it's not actually the correct spelling. However, it comes from the Rigstula. When Heimdall comes down and fathers the 3 classes of men, Bodi is one of the first sons listed of the first free man. And it actually means speaker with a capital S, and also one who owns property. So, yeah, kind of real boring. But the speaker with a capital S, doing my research, I found out is not a mistake. Even though I do not want his job and never want his job, it is believed that capital S denotes someone who spoke the law or who spoke in official terms. So that's the story of it. And the reason why mine stuck so much to me, I think, was number 1, it was meant to be. Number 2, it wasn't like skeet blue, it wasn't some ridiculous stuff. It was just very easy to say, very easy to spell, very easily digested. So that's the story.
Why not Matthew X?
Why not Matthew X? Yep. No reason.
Well, no, just to throw that out as like some, I guess, a historical note on it.
Mm-hmm.
I make a joke because it's funny, but it's very much for similar reasons. In the latter half of the last century, a lot of folks were searching out an ethnic religion that was closer to who they really were on the inside, and trying to make that point of separation between a culture or a belief system that was foreign to them. And so that's very much the same reason that Asatru of the day would, get often Old Norse inspired names. If you read the old runestone articles, it's funny because that was so common in there, and you run into all kind of odd names that may be difficult to pronounce or that you're unfamiliar with that people were taking back then. Yeah, it's really, I don't know, it's really interesting to look at where we came from and how we got to where we're at. We have a $10 donation from Gothi Trent East. Appreciate that, Trent. He says, no question, just proud to see one of my oldest friends on my favorite program. So Trent's calling you old, Bodie.
I am. I was thinking about when you were talking about, it's interesting to look back at the history. Just a living relic over here. I'm kind of a bridge between the old days and the new days. That's been brought to my attention or brought up to me more than once, which I can't deny it. I've literally been witness to the development and growth of Austria the past 22 years, so 23 years. So,
Nick, mute yourself. Nick, please mute yourself.
Hey, Nick, we can hear you.
It's not a purchase. It's about $85. I don't know. Sorry about that, guys. I think Nick's got somebody muted. I think it's us. That's okay. Okay, we'll look into next financial dealings here. All right, so hopefully we've got that sorted. Okay, so our next actual question does come from Trent as well. Gothi Mayo, what has been your favorite memory during your many years in the AFA?
Wow. That's about as hard as asking a parent what their favorite kid is.
Is it the same? Like there's an answer you just don't want to.
Yeah, there's an answer. You just don't want to tell the other answers. Well, I mean, there are so many. But I think we were talking about this before we went on air. I think that one of my favorites that I've told a couple of times, and this for real happened. This is some Asatru lore, or I guess this is some real deal lore. In the early 2000s, yes, the AFA existed. A lot of us on the eastern side of the country did not know that. That was when Yahoo groups were all the rage. And there was a Yahoo group called Our Meat Hall. And that was a bunch of people from all over the country. And people were coming from different philosophical viewpoints about Asatru and whatnot. And on that Yahoo groups. And it basically turned into a, hey, I bet you won't say that to my face. And I bet I will. And that turned into a moot, which that's the story I was given on how it started. So I don't know if they were going to meet and actually throw hands or what, but it turned into a bunch of people getting together and realized that they had more in common than they did apart. And so this was in the Northern Ozarks, which is in southern Missouri. And it was a place called Wade's on the Edge because the campground was on top of a 300-foot bluff. And so I showed up for the third one, I believe, and there were kindreds, but there were also families, and so everybody took a meal because we're in the Ozarks in these cabins, and so everybody took a meal as families to prepare for the folk. And me and my family, we had the breakfast on Friday morning. Well, we all knew because it was a big thing. Everybody was all abuzz about it, that Steve McNallen and his wife Sheila were coming to the Meat Hall Moot. And so that was a big deal. Everybody knew. Now I knew who Steve was, but I do not believe that I had seen a picture of the man at that point. So that Friday morning we get up and we're cooking breakfast, and I'm in this kitchen in this cabin, and I literally had, I think, a stove with 3 pots and 2 flat top griddles. I was short order and cooking my butt off. I was slinging hash, literally, cooking sausages, cooking eggs, and the door was behind me to my left. And at some point after I'd gotten started trying to cook breakfast for about 60 folks, which if my good friend Mike Joyner's watching, hey buddy, I know his pain. He knows that struggle where you're trying to get all this food out quickly. And in through the door walked this very slim older fellow, had on a pair of black jeans and a black polo shirt, and didn't introduce himself that I remember. But he says, out loud to anybody who would listen, hey, is there anything I can do to help? And one of my family members says, yes, you can help Bodie over there. He really needs help, cooking all the various breakfast meats and eggs and whatnot. And so this guy comes over and says, hey, are you Bodie? I said, yes, I am. He's like, well, I'm here to help. I said, cool. Why don't you get on them sausages? And just kind of pointed him that way, like, hey man, there's the spatula, there's the flat top, there's the sausages. Get to work, homie. And so for about the next 10 or 15 minutes, me and this guy exchanged very few words. Just kind of, hey, do this, hey, do that. Yeah, put those in there. Yep, we're serving them this way. Yep, do this. There's the rest of it. Blah, 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 blah. And then it's all done. Breakfast is prepared for the folk. And this guy kind of wipes his hands and it's like, I don't believe we probably met. I'm Steve McNallen. And yeah, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I had just been ordering around the founder of Modern Asatru like an employee. So that's one of my favorite memories. Yeah, that one will live with me forever. Anytime I see the boss man, the old man, we still kind of chuckle about that, about how we first met. And that was the beginning of a very impactful and meaningful weekend. There are more stories from those 3 or 4 days than just that one. So that's one of my favorite memories, though.
Good deal. In anticipation, I was trying to remember the first time that you and I met. I believe it was at Winter Nights.
2012.
2012. Okay, that's what I was thinking. And that was when we were
back when you were still the man, the myth, the mountain, Matt Flavell.
That was our
very first Winter Nights.
Was it?
Yep.
Yeah, that was when we were doing them in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. That was a really nice spot. I wish we could still do it there, but it's one of those options that didn't. I don't know a lot of people who were taken out by the COVID, but I do know a lot of businesses that were, and that's one of them that had to restructure their whole business model, unfortunately.
Oh, I didn't know that's what happened to Camp Natimas.
Yeah, we had a real good relationship with them, but they had to completely change how their business was run, and renting out to private organizations wasn't part of whatever their new structure was, unfortunately. But it was a really nice place. They did great by us. A lot of good memories there. But yeah, that was 11 years ago now. Yeah, 11 and a half, just about.
Yeah, there's another memory from that weekend that I could share real quick, and that is Founder McNallen's Odenblut that night, the main night, whether it was Friday or Saturday night. That was quite the emotional event. I know if any of you guys watching or listening have ever attended bloat done by the Alceria Gothi and Odin's bloat, they can be quite emotionally charged. They can rev you up pretty good in a spiritual way, and that was, I know the Alceria Gothi talks about Githya Hall's this here bloat where he felt the presence of his grandmother. That Odin's bloat there in 2012 at that Winter Nights, that first Winter Nights. Yeah, that was definitely a spiritual experience with a capital S. It was definitely something to be experienced, and I was glad I was there for it.
Yeah, I think that was a few years previous, but Steve doing his Odin bloat was the first bloat that I was ever a part of in that I wasn't leading. I was originally up in Alaska and fairly isolated when I went to my first AFA event, Midsummer in the Sierras.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Steve's Odin bloat was extremely powerful, and that did a lot to bring me to where I am today. We've got another question from folk builder Katie Joyner. Bodi, where is the bestest Hoff, and why should the folk come there in February?
It is in White Springs, Florida. It is the Hoff dedicated to Lord Njord, and you should definitely come and experience our down home Southern hospitality. You should come experience the piousness and the love and the community. And yeah, I know that all our other Hoff members may fight for the bestest Hoff, but we've been humoring you guys for a long time, and I think it's time we put a stop to that. We all know that Njord's Hoff is the bestest Hoff, so.
So Njord's Hoff is the newest Hoff. It is also the only Hoff that we still owe money on. So if anyone would like to help us make that not the case, now seems a fortuitous time to throw a donate link up and ask once again for anybody that wants to contribute to help us get that Hoff paid off, because that is the next step in our progress of getting his son, Lord Freyr, his Hoff. I'll say this too, February, one of the reasons that month was chosen for the event there is that's a really nice time to be in Florida.
Yes.
The heat and humidity in Florida can be oppressive to people who are not accustomed to it, and even to those who are a lot of the year. But February is a really nice time. If you're coming in from someplace that's colder, it's warm, it's comfortable, it's good, but it's not yet so hot and stuff that'll make you gross and feel uncomfortable. So it's really the perfect month to do something in Florida, and it's neat. It's a neat spot if you've never been there. It's a nice, I forget the acreage we got on it. I want to say just about 5.
I believe it's 5 or a little bit more than 5.
Yeah, so right around there, but it's really nice. There's 2 little ponds on the property. I'm told there's no gators in those ponds, unfortunately, but we'll see. Beautiful live oaks there as you come in. It's one of the things I really miss about the time I spent in Florida is those beautiful live oaks with the Spanish moss hanging from them.
Yep.
They're just beautiful and they're iconic, and got some really nice ones on the property there. It's a really cool building. It meets our needs really well. It's right there, part of that cool little community. White Springs turns out to be where my wife had her first Asatru event she went to. They happened to host it there for whatever reason, and just weird worked its way to where that's where we got Njord's Hoff. But it's nice. It has some special gravity that way. Yeah, Mandy was born and raised in Florida there, and when I first, shortly after I first met her, I moved down there to St. Augustine in December 2014. I was there for just about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting time. That those 2 years overlapped when we got the very first Hoff, Odin's Hoff, out in California. And that's also when a weird had in store that I'd be elevated to the position of Alsherier Gothi. And we left Florida I left Florida in December 2016, and Mandy followed me out like 2 weeks later in January of 2017. And it was one of those things. It was had a split with some people that I was pretty close to, that Mandy and I were both pretty close to in Florida. And there were, skepticism or doubts about the AFA under new leadership or just how that would work. And it meant a lot to me when I was able to come back out there in 2022 and arrive, bringing a Hoff with me. That was kind of that meant a lot to me, that I was able to able to make that happen there. Because it's one of those things that folks out there thought once we had okay, so this is kind of an interesting historical perspective. It had taken so long for us to get our first Hoff that there wasn't, I'm trying to get how to put it, there wasn't, it's not that I guess people rationalized we would never have more than one Hoff, but at the time we weren't looking at that. We were looking at, okay, cool, now we've got the Hoff, and we have the Hoff, this is the Hoff. Mm-hmm. And it's really something to think that we've been able to get 3 additional Hoffs in such a short amount of time. Been really blessed to be able to do that, and we've had some really hardworking and amazing people, and very generous donors, and a lot of really good things, a lot of blessings to let us get to where we are. It's nice sometimes to get on here with a person who's been involved in Asatru and involved in the AFA for a relatively long time, and see where we are, knowing where we came from and what it was like when we first got involved. For whatever reason, I thought Bodi was involved a little bit longer than 2001, but 2001 was when I came home to Asatru as well. Yep. So it's nice. I think we've seen a lot of the same events happen within Asatru and the same development happen. So it's nice. It's a blessing and a curse. It's really cool that people who come around now,
true words have never been spoken,
assume that this is just how it's always been. And of course we have Hoffs. Why wouldn't we have Hoffs? That's silly, and have no idea some of the more humble roots that Asatru came from. Mm-hmm. And it's frustrating that they don't know the struggle or whatever, but it's also really nice that people like Bodi have been around putting in the work to build this to what it is today, to where folks can take it for granted. It's one of the coolest things ever when I had my daughter and I realized she's born into a world with Hoffs to our gods. She will never know a world that doesn't have Hoffs to our gods.
Something that we could only dream about 22 years ago.
Yeah. I don't think folks necessarily understand, but in an organized way, Asatru has been revitalized since 72, conceptually since 1968, and it took until 2015 to get that first Hoff. So it was a long road.
It was, and that cannot. I feel like sometimes we beat a dead horse about explaining to all the new folks about how they don't know what it was like back in them streets. But, it really was something like what we are living now, what we are doing now as, not only leadership of the AFA, of the only church of the AC in Midgard, but just as everybody listening to this who is a supporter of the AFA, who's a member of the AFA or whatever, what we are living right now is something that literally was the stuff of dreams 20-something years ago. It literally was. So, I've actually had occasion to run into a couple of the old heads from back in the day in the past year or so since we got Sigerheim and started moving forward on that. And they said, oh, yeah, we heard you guys got some land. Like, yep. So what are you going to do with it? And like, well, the stuff we used to talk about, back in the day, if we got a big chunk of land, what we do with it. Yeah, but man, that's impossible. And I smiled and said, no, it's not. We're doing it. We're doing it right now. So 22 years ago, what we are doing right now was something that those people then are still talking about now, but we are actually doing. So, and it was rough. It was rough 20-something years ago. It was very, very rough. Most of you guys who have come to it in the past 20 years would not recognize it as you would not recognize it then as what it is now. We're very thankful for families. and for our women folk, because back then it was a lot of dudes. Yep. It was what we now call brosatry back then. There was a few pockets of seriousness and piousness, but they were relatively small. Thankfully, they have grown.
Yeah, just thinking about it, I mean, a point that I try to make on here a lot is, and I think this is natural to do, so it's not being overly critical. It's just being honest, and truth is one of our virtues. The biggest step you'll ever take in any endeavor is the distance from the couch to the front door, and that's how you're able to accomplish stuff. I think that really often in some of the circles that all of us run in, people spend a whole lot of time contemplating and debating and analyzing and recontemplating and arguing and theorizing and reading and whatever else. But very often they don't ever get around to the doing. And Asatru is truly about doing. We are our deeds. And it's nice. It's nice to see things that our God's accomplishments we're able to make and efforts that we're able to initiate and the blessings that our Gods pour upon those efforts when we get up and we start trying to do stuff. And it's so easy to make perfect the enemy of good and to wait around until the perfect moment or the perfect time in your life or the perfect circumstance or the perfect whatever it might be. And there's a whole lot of people at the end of their life on their deathbed wondering what life would have been like if instead of waiting for perfect, they just got out there and started doing the best they could with what they had. So it's really nice to be able to see accomplishments when our folk put their mind towards something and put their efforts towards something. The Gods really do bless those that get out there and put in the work. We got a couple other questions going on. Oh, we got a couple donation things here. I'm sorry, guys. $10 from Chris Lucat. Nick, mute yourself. I realize this is would have been more beneficial at the time had I said it, but he wasn't listening to me when he was unmuted earlier. I tried, but we appreciate your donation, Chris. Thank you for that. And we got a $20 donation from the Phelps family. Woo! Here's a kickoff donation for Njordshof tonight. But Baldershof is the bestest Hof.
Thank you.
So we appreciate your donation. We appreciate your efforts, and we appreciate the work you did on Njordshof website this last week. It looks beautiful. It looks awesome. Each of our websites that you move to looks better than the previous one, and I'm excited on where this is going. Thank you very much. They look awesome. So Bodie from Katie Joyner, what is your favorite meal you have been served at a Hoff?
That is a good question. Well, your husband's cheese grits or whatever, every cheese and sausage or whatever grits. Loved it so much I took some home from Sigerbloat back in last summer. So that was delicious. Yeah, I'd have to say probably Mike's cooking. Yeah, probably some of my favorite food I've ever been served at a Hoff. I mean, the man is wonderful in a kitchen. I mean, this guy can really cook. If for nothing else, please come to Njordshof so that you can taste my good friend's cooking, because the man is amazing. Doesn't matter what he makes, it's always top notch and tasty. And literally people who are like, no, I'm trying to watch my calories or my macros or whatever, we'll go back and get thirds and fourths. So yeah, I would have to say Mike's cooking. Yep.
Yeah, that's folk builder Mike Joyner. He does awesome things there. He has cooked for a number of events, and he certainly cooks for stuff at Nordhoff there. And it's really a special thing. It's delicious food. It's awesome, but also his doing that as part of his hospitality of being one of the folk builders of that Hoff is in and of itself a really kind of special act of devotion to our gods and to our church. And it's really a nice thing. And he puts that love into the food, I think. So I noticed there was a comment early on when we were talking about the quote unquote heathen names, about casting off the slave name like they did in the Black nationalist movement. And yes, exactly like that. And I don't think there was any intentional overlap, but there was really a movement in the 60s and 70s, certainly in the United States, to recapture ethnic identity and traditional belief and traditional culture. And you saw that in the Black nationalist movement. You saw that amongst various strands of white identity movements. You saw that with Native Americans in a number of different varieties on, the God is Red movement that they were doing about re-embracing their, ancestral faith and ancestral identity. So you saw it in a lot of different places. But yeah, it was the same kind of spirit. Bodhi's parents gave him a Hebrew name.
They sure did.
I happen to know that because my parents gave me the same Hebrew name.
Right.
So,
and while we could all, damn the man and take it back, and name ourselves things like, Leif and Ragnar and whatnot, whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to think, would I ever legally change my name? Probably not while my parents still live, because that's disrespectful to them. I know I could maybe change my first name, but I would have to leave my middle name because my dad gave me my middle name. But at the same time, my mom gave me my first name. She named me Matthew. So even though she's passed 4 or 5 years ago now, that would still be kind of disrespectful to her. So I would counsel against it if you are so inclined. I mean, if there is a good reason, and there are myriad of good reasons why you would want to do that are sound, but if you can at all possible, I mean, I would avoid it. I wouldn't do it because that's, your parents gave you that name out of love and out of, their hearts and carrying on, especially some of us in certain parts of the country where traditions run deeper than others sometimes. Some of us follow a very old European tradition of the new son getting the name of either living family member, a granddad or a great granddad or a great uncle, or a grandfather or great grandfather, whatever that's passed on, which I passed on to my son. So, and I have my middle name is from my grandfather's generation. So I had to think there for a second. So, yeah, I would keep your name as much as possible. I am an anomaly as far as names go. So happily so, but I don't recommend we all start, switching to Scandinavian names tomorrow.
I agree. Matthew's the name my parents gave me, and I respect that. It's the name I've got, and my Haminya is tied to that name. Names are really important. But one of the things to do isn't to go back and retroactively change what your name is. Your name is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But naming your children is an important thing to do. Start now going forward. And it's really important in our tradition to assign a good and an auspicious name to your child. And one of the things that, a lot of us do, and you can name your kid whatever you think is cool by all means. A lot of people will go and find a name out of the sagas and find, some super Viking name because that speaks to them. And we see a lot of that now. But something else to do is to look back in your family at your family's names, because quite a bit of them have European roots and aren't foreign names. And I think that's something easy enough for us all to do is look back at our family at, which of our ancestors that we know of didn't have a foreign name, had a European Aryan language name. And that's easier than you'd think. It's certainly what I did, and I was fortunate because this was a grandfather that I had a relationship with and I knew very well and did a large part in raising me. But it was important to do that kind of a naming tradition. That's why I named my daughter Aubrey, because it's a Celtic name that means elf ruler. And generationally, depending on the time, it has changed genders numerous times over the centuries. But you can find those in your family history, and it's neat to carry those on and build towards the future that way. Or something, when I first, actually my first AFA event I ever went to back in 2010, Gothi David James did a talk about naming customs. And what he said that is a good idea to do is kind of retroactively refit a name. If you want to name one of your children after an ancestor you have who has a biblical name or any foreign name for that matter, figure out that name's meaning and find the equivalent name in one of our traditions and something that reflects your heritage. And that's easy enough to do. There's a lot of crossover in that, in a lot of ways you can find a name that has a very similar meaning, but it's one of our names. And that's also a nice way to honor an ancestor that may have, had a name from a foreign people. Super honky. I'm in my late 40s. I've been training and working out with some younger gentlemen at my local park a few times over the last few months. They're called active clubs. When is the AFA doing that? So there are certainly AFA members that are part of clubs.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, is that going to mess with the broadcast that's ongoing? Okay, thank you. Okay, so folks can hear us now. It's hard because we don't have that feedback. Mandy says they can.
Hello. That is a great cartoon of me, by the way. I like that.
All right, so folks in the room, in the chat room, can you respond if you can hear us or not?
Please and thank you.
Okay, so at least someone can hear us. I'll go back to the answer I was given as far as active clubs. Improve physically is an awesome idea. I'm all for that in general, and it's something that we try to do. I was trying to mention that apprentice folk builder Bobby Shotwell hosts at Thorshoff, I think about once a month. It's something I'm looking forward to doing and hosting as well at Sigerheim when we get moved out there. I apologize for all these ongoing technical difficulties. I want to have some discussion to try to get some of that resolved, so they're not quite as vexing. But yeah, I'm not sure, Super Honky, what part of the world that you are in, but your folk builder may be able to hook you up with some AFA members in your area that would like to participate, because we want to be our very best selves, and being in decent physical condition is a big part of that for a number of reasons. Appearance and beauty are one of our values, important to us as well. So all of those things are good. I think the physical shape that we keep ourselves in is a reflection of our spiritual health, and it's the first impression that will make. So that's really important, something we work on.
I'm me again, Matt. You're still a Disney character, but I'm me again.
Yeah, I'm watching the ongoing struggle.
These things happen. Technical difficulties. Machines are ornery and cantankerous. We're okay.
Okay, so I'm looking, and partly I think because we've got the tech difficulties going on and stuff, we are about out of questions in our queue here. So I'm trying to think of a good, I don't know, Bodie, it's your first time on the program. Is there anything that you've been needing to say or wanting to say to the audience, or anything that you have particularly that you would like to address folks on?
No. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's many things that we could talk about, that we could occupy our time with. Something that.
Okay, so I got something that I think is useful for folks.
Okay.
So we talked in broad strokes about getting involved in things. I mentioned that the hardest step to take is always that one from the couch to the door. And I've talked about a little bit my first time. So first gathering of Asatru that I was involved in, I was living in Anchorage, Alaska at the time. And I think it was it could have been through a Yahoo group or through a meetup group. But back then there were
meetups.
Meetups was a big thing to try to find people in your local area. And so there was not any other AFA members in Anchorage at the time. There was a couple up in Fairbanks, but as far as folks close to me, that wasn't really there. So I found some unaffiliated Asatru up there, and they were going, and I forget the occasion, but it was during summer at some point. So I'm not sure what the occasion was. It was during summer, and they were hosting a bloat and a meal at a park. And I remember I had no idea what these, oddball people might be up to. I didn't know, and it was sketchy, and I was nervous, and I think that I masked social anxiety or fear on my part with, oh, these people are probably losers. These guys are probably lame, or whatever, whatever I wanted to tell myself. And I went, and it was, I remember I parked and I went creeping around in the woods to try to view them from a distance where I could see them and they couldn't see me, to see what I was getting myself into. And
oh my goodness.
What are these characters up to? What do they look like? What's going on? Because again, I didn't know what to expect. And I think that there's a lot of things that go into not taking that first step. There's infinite possibilities of finding some reason that you've got something else to do that day, or that now's not a good time, but maybe later, or that, whatever, fill in the blanks. Unfortunately, the human mind has an amazing capacity to manufacture excuses.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, I remember that. And there was two really nice ladies that I haven't talked to in a long time, unfortunately. A woman named Danielle, and she was there with her daughter, and a woman named Lisa, and they were there. And that was my first thing that I did. And we just got together in the middle of a beautiful park. That's one of the, Anchorage is a beautiful place, and it was a really nice park. And it was so much easier from there once I'd done it. Once I went to that first one, then, I think it was maybe 1 or 2 months later, I was hosting stuff at my house, and I was all in. But that first step is really hard. Bodie, what was your first step? What was the first Asatru thing you attended, no matter what the scale?
This would have been around probably, let's say, the summer of 2001, I would think, maybe around midsummer. That's whenever I was kind of in my probationary period, as it were. There was, and I know our good friend Gothi East, he lives not too far away from it. There's a place in West Georgia, or Northwest Georgia, Northern Georgia. There's a place called Dragon Hills. It is a 75-acre site that is, for the past 30-something years, I don't know if it's still active now, but it was in the 80s and the 90s. It was a big old neo-pagan gathering spot. And that first Gothi that I knew, Craig, him and his wife, She was some kind of hippy dippy neo pagan, and they ran 2 big events there every year. So I don't guess it was midsummer. It was around May Day, unfortunately, or not May Day, but Memorial Day. So they did a gathering that was a 4-day weekend for Memorial Day and one for Labor Day, and that was the first time that I can remember actually standing in bloat and sitting in stumble. Was that year? It was back then, and I'll tell you something you brought to mind, Matt, was we were talking about how it took so long to get the first off, and now we've gotten 2, 3, and 4 in such rapid succession. I'll tell you guys listening and watching one of the reasons why. Back in 2002, I went to, and I don't even remember where the heck we were in Alabama, but it was somewhere in Alabama. And this moot was put on by an organization called Kayak, spelled CIAK, and that stood for the Confederation of Independent Asatru Kindreds. Because there was the AFA, which was a California thing, and then there was the Asatru Alliance, which was a Arizona thing. And both in the early 2000s were kind of seen as big Asatru, like they're trying to make this national. They're trying to get all of us together. How dare they? Like, we're going to be a confederation of independent Asatru kindreds. So that's the silliness that was going on 20-something years ago. When you look back and go, well, gee, why did it take us so long to get to where we are now with the AFA? That's why. Stuff like that. Because Founder McNallen and Githia Sheila and some other folks back in the day, they were really trying to march towards what we have now. But people like that and their pig-headedness and their small-mindedness they were boxing themselves out of this march towards glory that we're all on now, that we're all participating and driving. They were doing this to themselves, and you could see the silliness and kind of the jankiness of it back then, but it was the only thing that we had because, Brownsville, Grass Valley, California is a long way from East Alabama, a long way from Florida, a long way from Georgia. So we didn't understand then what we could have now. So that's the silliness that was going on back then.
So I think this warrants a little bit of attention because it's an important point. It's always been a challenge and continues to be to this day. People, and I think any people that are uprooted for so long from folk identity, but the more I think on it, our people have always struggled with this. People are very selfish, and we can pretend that we're not, but I think the first instinct of people is to be very selfish. And I don't think, there are some souls out there that just aren't, and, may the gods bless them. But for a lot of us, it takes stopping, consciously acknowledging, and then choosing not to be selfish. One of the hardest things is, okay, cool, we need a Hoff. Where are we going to put it? Well, every single person thinks we should put it within walking distance of their house.
Yep.
And I've watched, any of the early attempts before we got Odin's Hoff to get a Hoff. Well, no, we want to keep our money local. No, we want to keep our money local. No, we're going to build our own Hoff. I have heard for 23 years now, probably 30 or more times about, no, we're going to build our own Hoff. Of those 30, how many of those Hoffs have happened? 0 of them. So to get Odin's Hoff, we put the entire weight of the Asatru Folk Assembly and generous friends that wanted to contribute towards one Hoff in Brownsville, California. And as Bodie said, well, I'm out here in Alabama. Why do I want a Hoff out there in California? You don't. But what I've said since the day I became Australia Gothi, what I said before then, the quickest way for you to get a Hoff in Alabama, we have one a state away, but the quickest way for you to get a Hoff close to you, wherever you find yourself, is to pay off Odin's Hoff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. It's a hard sell, and it's hard to get people to trust that. And it's hard to get people to get past their own self-centeredness. And again, I'm not saying I'm free of that. You have to consciously acknowledge it and choose not to be. But and as we got it, I think a little bit more people bought in that as soon as it was, paid off, it took people for everywhere. If we relied on the people within 3 hours of Odenshoff to fund it, we still wouldn't have the down payment raised.
Yep.
It takes all of us putting our weight behind one thing to make that happen. But then we were able to pay that off and make Thorshoff happen in just 5 years. And after we made Thorshoff happen, we found an amazing deal, but we were able to get Baldershoff a few months later. And then 2 years after that, we were able to get Nyordshoff. The quickest way to get a Hoff closer to you is truly to pay off Nyordshoff. That is the quickest way to get a Hoff near you. Because continuing to pool all of our resources together to get that Hoff and make it happen, that's how things get done. And it's taken a long time to gather that momentum, and it's still a constant struggle. But by sticking it out and wanting to be part of something, that makes that work. When Bodie and I first got involved in Asatru, that everybody wanting to do their own thing was the norm. And it was, it's always been described, it's like herding cats. Everybody wants to do their own thing. Everybody wants to start their own thing. Everybody wanted to be the fat king of their group of 4 fat in camp chairs.
Yep.
With
100%
rotisserie chicken.
Yep.
And that was it. And like the Theodsmen literally wanted to do that. Right. Everybody else, may not call themselves king, but they wanted to be in charge of it. And they would like argue over what position your camp chair was in around the garbage fire in the hole they dug in their backyard in the hood. And that's their aspirations for where we should be worshiping our gods. And I'm not faulting anybody. We all started there. But I'm faulting people that want to stay there.
Right. And, Matt, I was talking with my Gothi program student earlier, the wonderful folk builder, Stian Penner, about that, how that is a problem. And you asked, if I had anything I really wanted to say. That is one of the things, I told him that the old saying, the old adage of, a wise man plants a tree knowing that he'll never enjoy the shade of it. I know that those of you who live way far away from any Hoffs, because you may be in the middle of the country, you may be in the extreme corners or whatever. I get it. It's not a 12 or 14-hour drive, but it's still a 3.5-hour drive to the Hoff, to Nyordshoff for me, for the Hoff of which I'm attached as a priest. However, going back to that adage, if you are contributing as a member, even though you live 500, 1,000 miles away from any Hoff, you contributing to paying off those Hoffs is going to ensure that one is going to be closer to you sooner rather than later. So, yeah, it sucks that we have to travel such distances now for some of us to get to a Hoff, take flights, whatever. But I cannot express how much it's worth it. I just can't. It's absolutely worth it once you experience Hoff culture, no matter which one of the four you go to. Um, and we often talk about, Mike Joyner and myself, we talk about how every time we come to Nordhoff, Witten Swan has painted these beautiful murals at all four Hoffs, right? At Thorshoff and at Nordhoff, which are the two that I frequent most often. Every time we walk in there, we all do the same thing. We go up and we, I guess, kind of present ourselves in front of the mural and address the God of the hall every time. And it's something that 22 years ago, I couldn't even imagine that I would be walking into to one of four, temples dedicated to my gods, and I would be doing such a thing. And it to be a feeling of, of wholeness and, here I am again in this temple to Njord. Here I am again in this temple to Thor. Odenshoff will always be very special to me. That's the one that I've been to, even counting all the times I've been in Nordhoff. I think I've been to Odenshoff more times, more often. And yes, there was a sense of familiarity and, oh, I'm back at Odenshoff again. But every single time was special. Walking around that beautiful, beautiful Vey out back. If you have not seen that, that is a selling point for Odenshoff. I'll give them a little bit of hype up. If you have not seen that beautiful Vey out in the back of Odenshoff, the building itself is beautiful. It's been there forever. But if you have not seen that Vey out back, you're doing yourselves a disservice. So, yeah, that's one of the things that I'd like to kind of get on the bandwagon about is please help us pay off these Hoffs, because that will ensure you having one close to you, as the Alsheri Gothi said.
And that really is the case. And as we are economically able, we will continue to build temples to our God, or to establish, be it build or acquire temples to our gods. And we're absolutely committed to that. We're making awesome progress at it. We got really special things, but man, it came out of a place where, yeah, everybody wants to do their own thing. And what happens is when we come together, united in purpose, that as a folk, as a people, that's when we can do stuff. And we still see it. There's, some kind of uprising or schismatic people needing to do their own thing, because so many of our people are so broken that they don't know how to act right in a group. And it's unfortunate, but we continue to heal. We continue to move forward, and it gets better over time. But that's the thing. It's a long-term thing. What Bodi mentioned, planting trees that you won't get to sit under the shade of, but your kids will, your grandkids will.
Yep.
Being willing to do that willingness, that commitment is really important. I wanted to mention this too. There's the other option. If you want a Hoff closer to you, you can put you closer to one of our Hoffs. I didn't live near a Hoff when we got Odenshoff, and I moved across the country. It's something you can absolutely do if it's that important to you. So there's multiple paths to that, but the commitment is the key. So in the time that we've rattled on about that, we have some questions stacking up. So from Vromage, question: would Matt be okay with someone trying to find the Hoff payoff on GoFundMe? I think he means fund the Hoff payoff on GoFundMe, not sure. Fundraising for other churches is allowed. So in a bubble, that's an awesome idea. I like that because GoFundMe is such a recognizable platform. Unfortunately, GoFundMe is very bad about Deplatforming and screwing up the money on causes that they don't like.
Yep.
And we ran into that with trying to raise money for Odinsolf. GoFundMe ended up shutting us down and causing problems with us getting that money when we tried that there early on. So that was very problematic. We've heard horror stories from a lot of other people with causes that GoFundMe doesn't like. So unfortunately, there's certain platforms that do not treat us fairly, and GoFundMe is one of those. That's why we run our own fundraiser through our website. And if you guys take that and run with it and share it around, share it with your friends, it doesn't have to be AFA members. There's no qualification. Anybody who wants to donate to it, we welcome it and we appreciate it. If you guys get the word out there and put the link out there, it'll really help. But that's by far the best way, and we can trust that the money will go towards us. And it also helps they don't take a commission. It's us running our own thing. So 100% of it goes towards the cause. But yeah, we can't trust GoFundMe not to seize the money and eventually send it back to the donors or whatever they do with it. But yeah, I wish that we could use that. I wish we could, that would help accelerate what we're doing, certainly. Next question. When giving to the gods, full horn or full bottle? Can a horn be too small? So I've mentioned this a lot. So much of that revolves around intent. If it's all you got, then it has an increased value than if you've got a cellar full of mead and you're wondering about, what's the smallest horn I can find to give an offering in. It's all about what's in your heart at the time as far as the quantity. I don't think that the God's appreciation is based on fluid ounces that are offered.
I don't think they keep a tally.
No, I think they care about whether somebody is being generous and wholehearted with what they're doing, or if somebody is deliberately being miserly or stingy. I don't think there's really a specific answer to that, but not to avoid the question at all. I think it really depends, again, on the person. It's not about like quantity of liquid. Very often people at home making an offering or coming to their offer as a gesture and as a gift, maybe we'll pour a shot or something. It doesn't have to be a great quantity of liquid. The point is the intention of what you do behind it. That said, there's other mechanics that come into play. If you're doing a group ritual with 50 or 100 other Asatru, and you've got a little tiny horn that can barely fit any in it, then it looks chintzy and doesn't have the same effect as a full horn that's suitable for the occasion. So circumstances matter. You have any thoughts on that, Bodhi?
Yeah, I was going to say, if that's all you got, that's all you got. The gods don't take a tally. They don't say, old Bodhi's offerings, he used to give us this high shelf mead, and now he's giving us this low rent stuff. So we're not necessarily going to shower as much blessings on him and give him as much insight as we normally do because he's being a little chintzy with the mead. I don't think that's it.
Part of it's about the sharing process. Bodhi, can you drop the have 'em all verse on us about the many friends that Odin's won?
Oh yeah, do you mean the loaf in the cup?
I do.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as we were talking about it. I was going to say, that Odin himself says in the Hoffs that with half a loaf and an empty cup, I found myself a friend. And if that's good enough for the father of the gods to make friends out on the road, then I don't think that we would be going too far wrong with giving the best we had. And, when we speak of like where my name comes from earlier, when we speak of the Rigstula being part of Rigsbud kindred, What's up, Dan? Being part of Rig's blood kindred, Rig was the name that Heimdall took when he came down to Midgard to father the 3 classes of men. And as you move through that story, you see that great-grandmother and great-grandfather did not have, or grandmother and grandfather, they did not have the best. Their house was not very well put together. It was drafty. The meat was half cooked when he arrived. There was no ale that was brewed. And it progresses on, into greater levels of accoutrement as you move through the story. But the point is that grandmother and grandfather, great-grandmother and grandfather, grandmother and grandfather, and father and mother, the 3 couples, they gave the best that they had to this auspicious traveler. They didn't turn him away because they didn't have the fanciest goods and the best meat and the best, room and board. They gave him what they had. They gave him the best that they had. And I think that's one of the lessons that we can take from that. And that applies to this, is that it doesn't matter if you have, if it's just you at your home altar, and you have a small drinking horn that was, let's say that was the only one that you could afford on your budget. Okay. You're not getting any judgment from us. You are not getting any furrowed brows because you don't have this massive drinking horn that holds 14 bottles of liquor. I mean, that's not a thing. Let's not make that a thing. Let's, as the kids say nowadays, let's normalize doing the best we can with what we've got. Now, you should aspire to give the gods always the best of what you have. And that doesn't mean that you give them gold and jewels that you are trying to save for your retirement or something like that. But it's the best of what you can afford to give without making yourself destitute. I remember, speaking of ancient things, which is one of my specialties, back in the day, whenever I was, like I said, when I was kind of trafficking in neo-pagan circles, traveling, not trafficking, that's a better word, traveling in neo-pagan circles, I found out that many, many, many times, a lot of these folks would forego bills to go to these gatherings. Like, they would not pay their light bill, or they would, put off their car payment so they could spend $300 or $400 or more for a weekend. And I remember being of 2 minds about that. I remember thinking, wow, that's a lot of dedication to the cause. And then also I remember thinking, why don't you just save up and make sure that your bills are paid and you can go to this event? Because that's really not the most ideal situation. We don't ever want any of you to forego an essential thing, that you need for your livelihood or to keep living, to come to an event. I mean,
so there's 2 points that I'd like to make. First, there is the nature of sacrifice. That word has come to mean something that it didn't mean when our ancestors were offering to our gods. Most, if not all, religions have some form of sacrifice involved. And the predominant religion of our culture for the last 1,500 years comes from Hebrew Judaic roots, and the nature of their sacrifice to their God is very different. It was very much the giving up of something valuable as a burnt offering, and in its entirety, of taking something and giving it value to their God. The nature of our sacrifice was really different. Now, the word sacrifice comes from the Latin sacred and to make. So to make something sacred, the idea is you're taking that exists in the mundane world, and through ritual, you are sanctifying it as an offering to your gods. But the sacrifice of our ancestors is really different. there was, a portion or the blood perhaps, or, the heart or something like that set aside for the gods, or maybe you'd make a plate for them on the altar. But the idea was you were sharing a meal with them. It was a lot about sharing. And in that way, it very much is like the line that we quoted from the Havamal, where Odin made friends with a half a loaf and a half cup. That sharing with our gods is the nature of allowing. It's not to say there's not a time and a place to give gifts to our gods, but I think considering what they want or the value of it, realistically, it's absolutely a gift to Njord to contribute to paying off his Hoff. It's a gift to Lord Frey to contribute to establishing his Hoff. Those have a lot of value, I think, to giving something tremendous to one of our gods. And I think I believe that our gods would value a temple to them much more than they would value an expensive bottle of mead. But what's more common is that sharing, is that when you come before your altar, like I mentioned earlier, some people will leave a shot. Some people will also leave a shot and take a shot so that they're sharing a drink with our gods, or leave a portion of the meal that they're preparing for their families so that their gods are included in that sharing. The idea of sharing and communing with our gods is really, really important. Now, giving them something, offering them just a gift for a gift's sake, that's fine. That's absolutely appropriate. And there's plenty of time and place for that. But in the thought process of it, think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. But yeah, money spent towards your church and towards the success of Asatru and you and your family's further participation in it is absolutely an offering to our gods, and it's a holy act. And I hope people grow to see it that way. So our next question is from Finn Wraith. What is your ancestry? You go ahead and go first on this, Bodie. What is your ancestry? Which part of Europe did they come from?
They came from, my honkies in particular, came from Germany, France, and England, with a little bit of Scots and Scandinavian thrown in. I say a little bit. I am, according to all of the spit tube purveyors out there, I am roughly anywhere between, depending on who you ask, 20 to 25% Scottish. Go Clan Fraser. And of course, I like to joke that, of course, because I am who I am, I couldn't be any Scotsman. I had to be descended from the folks that live around Loch Ness. So of course I do. I am a Fraser of Inverness, right on the banks of Loch Ness. So that and a little bit of continental French and a little bit of English and Scottish, with a smattering of Scandinavians thrown in for flavor.
Yeah, my people are predominantly from England and have been in the United States. Most of my people that I can trace or have any knowledge of have been in the United States for a very long time.
Mine too.
Especially the American South, since well before the War of Independence, originally in the Carolinas, farming in the Carolinas, and then moving over towards, eventually a bunch of my people ended up in Mississippi. The most recent from Europe lines of my people, we have on my dad's mom's side, my dad's mom's father's side, we've got folks from Scotland, from Clan Ross, and other than that, also at the very beginning of the 1900s, we have a couple who were the gentleman was a Frenchman, or no, I'm sorry, the gentleman was a Swissman, and his wife was French, and they actually came over separately. I don't know the nature of how their marriage was set up, but they came over separately. It's Fritz Montandon and his wife Sophie. They came over, and that I was able to find the pictures of the ships they came over on, and I've got a. If I had it handy, I would show you a picture of them. But those are the most recent from Europe. So, but other than that, the vast majority, as far as I know, from England.
Yeah, all of mine have been here since my oldest ancestor that I know. Well, the oldest ancestor, the original one who came here. Let's say it that way. Words are hard. My first American ancestor stepped off the boat from England somewhere, wherever you got off the boat in Virginia back then, in 1685. And it took them another 100 some odd years to get from Virginia down here. Because as I said earlier, we were the original whiteys who came in kind of, if you follow the coast down through the Carolinas, across the bottom half of Georgia and into the panhandle of Florida, and on across southern Alabama and into southern Mississippi and Louisiana and Texas, I think is where we finally stopped. But along the way, my people stopped in the panhandle of Florida. The Mayos come from Jackson County, Florida, which is not too far away from New Orleans. But yeah, we were all here. I don't know of any recent additions past the late 17th century, early 18th century. So we've been here a long time.
Yeah, I'm just checking on something on a date. I think the oldest of my family that I know that was born here was John Bond, born in North Carolina in 1690. But yeah, so I've got American roots that go back that far. I believe his family was from Dorset in England.
Yeah, it was an interesting uncovering my genealogy and my last name, which is a bit unique. It has, I used to say, unfortunately, it has French origins. I don't say that anymore. I know we always clown on our French relatives and cousins, but, for various reasons, which we won't get into, but, Mayo was originally Mayeux. It was Mayo. And then through the process of history and all the forces that shaped that, it became Mayhew. Then Mayhew became Mayho, Mayho. Then they lopped the H off and left the O. People think we're Irish because County Mayo is one of the largest counties in Ireland, but they're literally, you guys can fact check this for me, there are literally there's not a single soul in the entire island of Ireland with the last name Mayo. Not a single one. Which is an odd thing, but it's the truth as far as I can reckon it. So, yeah, Mayo is an Anglo name by way of France, as so many things were in England back in the day. So, yeah, but then we came over here and we haven't left since. So,
Gothi Bodi, what is your favorite holiday?
My favorite holiday, probably Midsummer.
How come?
Because while Yule, as we've talked about, while Yule is, that time of the year where we're starting the year over, and we are taking stock of the year, and we are looking forward. We're drawing inwards, as Go the East likes to say. We're drawing inwards in a good way, and we're communing with our ancestors and ourselves, and we're kind of hunkering down for the long winter. Midsummer is literally the solar polar opposite, I guess you could say. So I've always enjoyed midsummer since I've been an Asatru, because it's just that radiant exuberance that midsummer signifies. It's just when you are literally and figuratively waxing in might as a people, as as an individual, if you're doing things right, if you're following the holy tides and the seasons correctly and manifesting them internally, then when you get to midsummer, that is an outpouring of just right action and energy, and in a good way. And it's everything is green. Yes, it might be hot, but everything is green, everything is growing, everything is fertile. It's kind of a point in the year where, despite trials and tribulations, life is good. We're living high on the hog. We're cruising on the crest of the wave, as it were, at midsummer, and that's always been one of my favorite times of the year. It's literally my favorite holiday.
Fair enough. Super Honky has one more question. I have one more question.
I love that name.
What do you guys think about border situation? If the videos and info is true, we are way behind enemy lines, in my opinion. Thanks for responding to the other question. So here's a thing, and I think that it, I don't know, flows into a bigger topic here. So border situation is terrible because it just gives away and takes away from our folk. 1 second. I love you too, Aubrey. Good night. Sleep good. Yeah, so that's unfortunate. There's also a lot of criminality and unfortunate things that are coming across the border as well, which are unfortunate. But I think a bigger thing to what we're talking about, politically, there's lots of stuff going on that's really, really bad. I think that all of us are surrounded every day by flows of information that tell us just how bad everything is. I know, I'm aware, but what is really important, and by all means, if you have the ability to affect that, and you're in a position to make decisions that affect that, then please do that. Be active, make that happen. In the meantime, and I think this goes into a different question we've got a little bit further down the queue, but in the meantime, what do we have that is accessible that we can do something with? And I think that's where we're trying to focus our attention. So many of us are very, very frustrated at big things in the world that we have no ability to substantially affect or make better. One thing we can absolutely make better is our Asatru Folk Assembly. And a big part of what we do is building that golden age within the area that we have the ability to affect, within our family, within our faith community in the Asatru Folk Assembly. It's why we're trying to live closer together. We're trying to gather our people around Hoffs. We're trying to bring as many people as we can of our folk to Sigerheim and build an Asatru village there with our folks. We can look out for each other, so we can help each other when we're in need, no matter what that help might look like. And so we can build the world that we want in the microcosm that is the AFA. And the more we do that, the more we bring our folk home, the more we can make the world that we want. The world is a very, very big place, And I don't think we should be aloof from and not care about macro political issues. Of course we should. Ability to, move that needle, please do. But in the meantime, we have a huge that it is, and we can build the world we want. And there's a lot of space to where we can do really amazing things, and we're doing that. And if you are a part of that or you want to be, we'd love to have your help doing that. Bodi, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, the thought that come to mind is, an old adage from back in the day, because that's where I'm from. Is everybody wants to be focused until it's time to defocus things, and the same folks who want to constantly traffic in political things and want to constantly be worried about the next political ism. As El Serigo, they said, do I pay attention to geopolitics and national politics? Yeah, you damn right I do. But I also recognize the fact that and this is going to sound to some as a cop-out, but it's not, I am powerless to do anything about it. What I am empowered to change is what we're about right now. I'm not a political operative. I'm a priest of the Aesir. That is my scope and my sphere of influence and my scope of practice. That is what I'm going to concern myself with. The microcosm can affect the macrocosm. So as the Alshirigo said, if we would just focus on ourselves, and I'm not advocating being head in the sand. I'm not advocating that we completely tune out the outside world or the everyday world that this political stuff happens in. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that it would behoove us to be concerned more about each other and more about this stuff that we have going on. To, as Founder McNallen has said recently with his new book, the last time that Wotan awakened himself or awakened in his people, it was more of a martial aspect, and it didn't really turn out so well. So now this time is a spiritual awakening. So if we tried the politics and it didn't work once, the definition of stupidity is doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result. I feel that Wotan himself is telling us that the solution is going to be spiritual. It's going to be religious. I think that that's why the gods have heaped victory upon us. Have we had our setbacks? Have we had our losses? Yes, we have. But as the Alshirigo likes to remind me all the time, you have to look at the net positive and the net negative. And as it stands right now, we are at a net positive. Doing what we're doing, aligning ourselves with our spiritual interests, curing our soul sickness, getting back to where we need to be in here and in here. Instead of worrying about everything, border crisis. I mean, to be honest with you, man, I'm more concerned about doing a good job as far as leading my folk. I'm more concerned about making sure that their needs are met spiritually and in whatever way I can accomplish than I am about what's going on thousands of miles away from me. I'm trying to think worldwide and act locally, as the old saying goes.
So I have a couple of other thoughts. Border crisis stuff and how we're behind enemy lines in a lot of ways that way that you suggested. I don't know that that's true. Behind foreign lines, perhaps, but I think that we find ourselves much more behind enemy lines with a lot of the ruling elites in the country that we're in that, are of the same genetic stock as the rest of us. I think those people are doing far more to hurt us than, the other folk that are taking over the southern western part of the United States and more. I see what you're saying, and demographic shift. I don't like stuff that my forefathers fought for and built being taken over by a different group of people. I mean, certainly I don't think that's good for us, but I also think that a lot of the folks that are allowing that to happen are much bigger, much bigger enemy to us than them. But again, what are you going to do about it? And I think a whole lot of our people, I've watched a lot of people for ever since I was aware of it. So, I don't know, probably about 30 years now, I've watched a whole bunch of our people get very upset about lots of political things. I haven't watched that upsetness manifest in positive change towards the political ends that those people want most of the time. What I have seen is people getting out and voting and making some better things happen locally, some better things happen in, ways that are available to them. But where I've seen the most bang for your buck on building the world that you want is within our AFA, is within our AFA family. That has been the biggest thing that I've seen in my life that has moved what we want forward in a way that benefits my family, in a way that benefits my friends, and in a way that builds the world that I want to see. And so, do what you want to do. If there's stuff that you can be politically active in, the AFA has never encouraged people not to be politically active by all means. But politics isn't necessarily sitting around complaining with other guys who complain about it. It's very often getting people in office, voting on things, even if it's not 100% your guy, to move stuff forward. I think that we've got really narrow views on a lot of these things. But like I said before, this is something that you can make a huge difference in, moving the needle and making the world better. And that's it's what we try to focus our time on. As people have said over in the chat, it's really easy to get bogged down with doom porn. We've got a constant.
Yep.
So one of the places so I mentioned earlier, we get deplatformed places because folks don't like us. But one place that we have a really big following still is Twitter. Man, I wish I could turn off my feed on Twitter and just look for the stuff that I want to look for, because the feed itself is just constant negativity 24/7. And it's really easy to let that weigh you down and beat you into inactivity and beat you into hiding in your basement and gnashing your teeth and shaking your fist at the world, instead of getting out there and capitalizing on all the amazing things that we can do. And we're doing really great stuff together. So I hope people listening to this, check out what we're up to and get involved. Be part of what we're building, instead of bemoaning all of the things that other folks are tearing down.
Yeah, Matt, on one of the on that tip about, you could just doom porn yourself into inactivity. Something that my good friend and kinsman Whitten Young says all the time is that are you going to keep saying one day, or are you going to say day one?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to say
Absolutely.
one day or day one?
Absolutely.
You can sit there and, say all day long. And like I said earlier, 20 something years ago, when I was sitting around those fires with those guys who were content to sit around the same fires forever, they would all say, man, one day it'd be nice if we had this or that or this or that. And 20 something years later, we're doing it. We're doing these things because some of us at some point said, enough of this one day. Today is day one. So
you and I have sat in a lot of, though they were separated by an entire continent, I think we sat around a lot of proverbially the same fires of the fat dudes wondered what it'd be like one of these days. Some of those folks have come with us and are enjoying what we've got. And unfortunately, some of those guys are still sitting around those same fires, wondering what could be. And I feel bad for them. I wish they'd come join what we're doing. But we've watched a lot of people who are perpetually in the one of these days, And it is seductive. The lure of the couch cushion is quite seductive. And it's hard to break that initial friction to get some momentum behind you and to get propelled towards something better. And we all get it. I get it too. I think it's easy to hold on one second. Anyways, what I was saying is I think it's really easy to think that I don't know, that I'm looking down my nose and that I'm being aloof from these things as if I don't feel it or understand the struggle. I do. I've been there, and I have a lot of the same things internally that pull me towards the same negative directions that I complain about and that I do sometimes get sarcastic about. We all struggle with some of these same things. Don't think that you're the only one, whoever's listening to this needs to hear it. Don't think you're the only one that gets depressed by the politics around you, or the only one that finds it easier to sit down and screw around on watching reels on your phone than getting out and building something that you dream about. We all do that. Mm-hmm. It's the ability to break free from that and overcome it. And as I was saying earlier, it's, with the selfish thing, there are some people that it comes easy for, that they just, they're just built of better stuff than the rest of us, and good on them. But for the rest of us, you have to get up every day to make this world better than it was when you got up, and to make yourself better than you were when you got up. And it's a daily challenge, and it's a daily action. But it's worth doing. That's the theme of so much of our belief cycle. All of it is about constant motion. It's about staying one step ahead of the wolves. Our beliefs tell us there's wolves out there trying to eat the sun, trying to eat the moon. And it's a constant struggle to stay just out of the gaping maw of the wolf. And it's interesting that their names really are, haters, like the hater and mockery.
Yeah, the hater and mockery. The one who mocks.
But they seek to devour us, and it's our job to stay one step ahead. Always one step ahead, and never rest. That's why this podcast is called Victory Never Sleeps. Because if they catch you sleeping, then you get ate.
Yeah, and there's, that's the thing, the founder McNallen talks a lot about us working our will in Midgard. Then if you really want to be 100% real about it, what the Asatru Gothi was just saying, our ancestors, when they carved civilization out of the wilderness, they were always one mistake away from losing everything. They were always one, failed harvest, one blight on their animals, one, war that came through their area, or war being made against them, or them having to go to war against somebody else. They were always one step and one mistake away from losing everything. But they kept the wolves, they kept the door locked, and they kept the wolves at bay for another day, and then another day, and then another day. And what the Asatru Gothi was saying earlier about it's what you do when you break free from that. That's how I look at it. Is yes, do I keep abreast of what's going on politically, not only locally, statewide, nationally, and internationally? Of course I do. But when that doom kind of comes over me, like, man, the world really is a crap show, and it really is in shambles. Okay, well, you can sit there and you can ruminate and marinate in that for a minute, and then you have one or two choices. You can let it depress you, and you can let it lull you into depressed and anxious inaction, or you can shake it off and go, well, you know what? Okay. I've got this other stuff that I need to do. I need to connect with my folk. I need to go to the Hoff. I need to, read the lore. I need to talk to a Gothi. I need to talk to a folk builder. I need to go to a local moot. I need to engage with my folk, because that is how you're going to affect change here and now. Like I said earlier, the microcosm affects the macrocosm. So it's what we do. It's often the small things we do that can have a large effect on our lives. And, I can tell you this much. I've already mentioned him a bunch, but my good friend Gothi East, when I was not doing so hot myself a while back, he recommended to me that if I dedicated myself or rededicated myself to the church and to the fold, that my life would get better. And he was 1000% correct, because my life has gotten better. It just keeps getting better. So, your results may vary, but I don't think they're going to vary too far off of mine. There is something to be said for giving yourself to a cause like this. And it's not just a cause. And, I stress this to our membership in my district a lot, is that we are not a club. We are not an organization. We are a church. So that is an important distinction to be made. So while we can pay attention to politics and we can be worried about them, and we can, try to keep on our toes about, the changes that are coming, we are not a political organization. But yes, we have to pay attention to it. We have to make sure we understand what's happening around us. But we are affecting our change, and we are working our will on Midgard by doing what we can do for each other. So there's that.
So here's a thing too, and this goes into our next question. So our next question, one day may we have a unifier to bring all our folk home. Not sure which gods to pray to for that. Perhaps all of them. Say all of them, any of them, but pray and act. So it'd be cool. Maybe somebody will come along and unify all of our people. That would be awesome. In the meantime, be the closest to that you can be until that guy gets there.
Yep.
Are you unifying people? What are you doing to unify people? Unify the entire white race? Maybe not. What about unify one other of our folk? Then
Just
what about
one.
two? Then what about three? It's so often a game of inches. We're always looking for that big, lightning bolt event that happens that changes the whole game. And that's cool, but it's very, very rare. Much more often, victory isn't about that one big cataclysmic thing that happens. It's about little victories that you win every single day. And you stack one on top of another. That's how you get those big victories. Often those things are unsung, but that's how you make those things happen. So yeah, pray for somebody to appear that's going to unify all of our folk. That's great. In the meantime, do your part to be that guy in whatever you have the ability to do. It's what I'm trying really hard to do in the sphere that I have. That's what a lot of us are trying to do. And the AFA is a really good way to do that. It's the most effective way that I've found in my life to bring our folk together. And is it all of them? No. Is it hundreds more than sitting around hoping and wishing? Absolutely it is. Will it be thousands more by the time I pass away? I hope so. I'm going to do my part. And if it's not, I'm not going to be able to look back at my life and say it's because I didn't try. And that's the thing I wanted to say. Not just that, are you bringing them together? And if you see the next guy over that is bringing folks together, are you willing to get behind him and be part of that and make stuff happen? because as we mentioned earlier, everybody's trying to be their own, again, the king of their own backyard fat dude camp chair circle, and function a lot better when we're all doing it together. It's part of it. Part of unifying. Everybody wants the kingdom, but only if they get to be king. And it's not how stuff works, unfortunately. Other thing I was going to say, and this is, I think, related. So many of us are very, very used to waiting for somebody else to make something happen. And we sit around and we wait and we analyze what everybody else is doing wrong, or what they could be doing better, what they should be doing, or man, I can't wait till this thing happens. And you look around for a hero, and if you see one, by all means, get behind them. And if you don't, be that guy. Pick up the torch, pick up the banner, and carry it. Be that for the next guy, so the next guy doesn't find themselves in the spot you were in, wondering where's the guy to hold their hand and bring them into something better. Be that guy. And that's something that's a conclusion that I think I came to in 2015 or so, and I've tried really hard to do my part to be that guy as best as I could in the area that I can be, to help folks do more. And I think that if we all do that, we'll all be so much further ahead of the game.
I'm confronted by that in my daily professional life. I am every day that I work forced to be that guy, because I don't have a choice. That is my chosen profession, my willing lot in life. I love it to death. It's the other half of me. This is one half, that's the other half. And somewhere in the middle I add some fun. But when you realize everybody wants someone to come and fix their problems for them. And if you are designated, as I am by society, as being that person who fixes some particular problems, then you don't get the luxury of having someone else fix the problem. You're the guy who's been called to fix the problem, so it's up to you. And there was a banner that hung in a firehouse I worked in that I kind of want to hang around, me all the time, or see it all the time. And it said, "No one's coming. It's up to you. Nobody else is coming. It's up to you." And those of us in the public safety 911 world, and I think that has a lot of meaning for us, and it translates to me into my work as a Gothi as no one else is coming. And that doesn't mean that nobody else is coming down the pike. There's no one else that has been designated to do my job in my area but me right now. There will be in the future, but I have been ordained and asked and elevated to do this job to the best of my ability. So while there may be other Gothar coming down the pike in the future, I'm here now. I am trying to do things now. I'm trying to make the best of my time now, so that I may make it easier for the guy who's coming behind me. Hopefully I will have laid enough good groundwork to where maybe this new guy has it easier than me. Not going to give him a cakewalk, but maybe he has it easier than me. And that's the point of all of it.
That's the thing. And a lot of these things kind of synergize and go together, but don't waste time worrying about all the things you can't fix or all the things you can't do. Focus on the things you can do, because there is a lot that every single one of us has opportunities to do better than we currently have, to do better for ourselves, to do better for our families, and to do better for our folk. If you're not involved, jump in, get involved, and be part of stuff. You guys have a lot of options of things to be part of. If it's something that advances our folk and our values, cool, be part of it. If you guys are looking for something to be a part of that's accomplishing beautiful things together, be part of us. Join our AFA family. Be part of what we're doing. We're at a time now to where we're small enough that you have a tremendous opportunity to one person be extremely impactful. So if you're looking for something to do, get on the team. The next question is an interesting one, also from Chris Lucat. If one wished to build their own Hoff to the gods and then donate it to the AFA, is that allowed? Absolutely, that's allowed. There's some stuff I would say to it. So, I would be foolish to turn that down. So of course I'm not going to. If anybody builds a Hoff and donates it to us, the very least you will get is a hearty thank you and lots of appreciation. But factor in, what does that cost you to build a Hoff? Are we better served with the Hoff that you build wherever you might find to build it? Or are we better off if you took the money that you would spend on that Hoff or the labor that you would spend on that Hoff and poured that into the AFA's next Hoff? Because people ask that a lot. Some people have had parcels of land and various things. I'm like, man, if I donate, this acreage that I have in the middle of nowhere up in wherever where we don't have any people. Well, if I donate that for the AFA to build a Hoff on, will you guys take it? Well, certainly we'll take it, but I want to be completely honest. We would take it and we would sell it. And we would take the money that we raised from selling it and put it into the Hoff that we're actually doing, where we actually have Gothar and people to attend and to build it most efficiently. And this is something similar, and it's something similar we run into with any of our food distribution. We run food pantries out of each of our Hoffs. We do a folk services program for our members who are in need and they're struggling. And everybody's like, well, if I want to donate canned food, where do I ship it? Well, it costs a lot to ship cans. Dollars spend, instead of buying canned food, send dollars to something that we're actually doing. And then the people who are in need of it can spend it how they need to. And we can allocate the resources. It's all about the efficiency of resource management. But yeah, if you build a Hoff and donate it to us, absolutely, we appreciate that. That would be amazing. I think you would get a much better result if your goal is for the AFA to have more Hoffs, to put those resources into the Hoffs that we're trying to do already, that we're moving forward on. That will accelerate our pace of making Hoffs to our gods happen. Hey man, there's cold, the people are cold. Well, where do I send, used clothing to? We're much better served having dollars than sending used clothes that, depending on where they go, may or may not be. But that's an issue of, that's one of the cool things, and it's easy to look at that as not or as disheartening. But that's one of the cool things, of the fact that we're doing real stuff, and that's how real stuff can get accomplished. Moving things from the realm of ideas and intention into reality and physicality is a big, big transition, and we're at a point where we're able to do that. So, yeah, I hope that addresses the question. Bodhi, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, a couple of things. This has been on my mind since we've been talking about the olden days, and it applies to this. like the house here you go that was saying, you want to build a Hoff and you want to give it to the church. That's great. But if you live in the middle of nowhere where there's just you, then we're going to lean on you to maintain it, to upkeep it, to keep the lights on, to make sure it's in serviceable working order, to host events, to do all this other stuff. If you want to give us land, again, if you live out in the middle of nowhere, it's really not as much use to us as it would be, like the Australia Gothi said, to donate to us paying off New York's off so that we can get Frace off. We already have a plan. The Australia Gothi and the Witten and the Gothi, we have a plan. So it would, like you said, you would be better served. And it's a matter of, we don't want to stifle that enthusiasm and that giving nature, but we want to be smart about it. And to me, that all stems from a phenomenon that occurs with us because of, and if you're new to all of this, we referred often to our people being soul sick, to having a soul sickness, and that can take many forms. And the one that is in play here, I will address in a slightly roundabout manner. So that moot that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, where I met Founder McNally for the first time and ordered him around, and that was all funny. There was a gentleman there who unfortunately has since passed away. But I was a brand new Asatru, newly minted, about a year or so, year and a half in. And man, I was hot to trot. I was excited. I was, meeting all these other Asatru from around the country. I had driven 700 some odd miles to Missouri to get there. So there's this old guy. He's been around since the 80s. And I am like that little puppy who's excited to be around other dogs for the first time. I am just barking and yapping and just wanting to talk to everybody. And I'm telling this guy my life story. And he could not be less interested. He really couldn't. And I don't blame him. And finally, after I finally wound down, he looked at me and he said, "Listen, I think you've got this backwards. Nobody cares where you came from. The only thing that we care about is that you're here now, and what are you going to do now that you're here?" So he condensed that later on into a simpler, more easily digestible kind of soundbite. And he said that the fallacy or the mistake that folks coming into Asatru make is that they believe that they are going to add their identity to the folk, where the actual right, proper course of action is that you take your identity from the folk. You find out where you fit in, where you can be of a contribution and a help, and you do that. Too often, people come into this and they think, I'm going to improve things. You guys have just been kind of holding the fort down a little bit until I arrive. Now I'm going to make all the necessary changes to where we can have everything that we want. Whereas the Australia, they said, it's those little victories every single day. Grand gestures have their place, but they are few and far between. So when you realize that your identity comes from within the folk and that you are not adding your identity to it, then I think things get a lot smoother and get a lot better. And we can do a lot of good a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the kind of bigger theme we've talked about of the individualism. And I say this, and this isn't, none of this is negative toward the person who asked the question. If somebody built a Hoff and gave it to us, we would say thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
But thing is, I think that the odds of someone doing that who is independently wealthy and a master engineer and master carpenter that's going to build this amazing edifice, that's probably slim. What I think would more often happen is if we had, 5 or 6 people give us small, well-intentioned, okay, so this is something that we did see. in the era before we had Hoffs, a number of people, rather than contribute to getting a recognizable house of worship, well, instead, I'm going to build my own Hoff. And they would get, literally, they'd get a shed kit from Home Depot or something, maybe one of those sheds that they have out in the parking lot. And they would get that and they would doctor it up and make it nice. And they'd be like, aha, now I have a Hoff. That is a lot better than having no Hoffs. Absolutely, no question asked. But if we had, 10 of those guys that got their own shed Hoff that they built on their own to donate or because it's kind of cool, if we took all of that instead and put it towards a Hoff that's of the scope, that's recognizable to the community as a house of worship, and that can house a significant number of our people to worship our gods in a elevated fashion, we'd be much, much better served. And that's one of the big struggles of Asatru is Asatru of the 70s or 80s, that was the norm, and we didn't have these things. When we started putting all of our resources together, when we move forward unified as a folk to the extent that we are, that's when the magic happened. And so that's how the magic's going to continue to happen in the future, most likely. And again, maybe we'll find, maybe there'll be some, athlete or celebrity or business tycoon that comes out and converts and joins the AFA and, cool, I'll buy you guys a Hoff and I'll spend $1 million on it and we'll have something amazing. But that's kind of like I said earlier, when that one guy comes to unify the entire folk, we stand ready for that. We're waiting for it. That'd be awesome when it happens. But in the meantime, we've got a really good system that's working much, much better than I think anybody thought it might. And so we've got a plan, and we're going to keep working that plan and see where that takes us. Our next question. Do you operate outside the United States? Yes, we have members in 13 countries besides the United States right now. So absolutely we do. What will you name a Hoff when you run out of gods to name them after?
Good question.
I was literally thinking about that earlier today. I don't know, and I don't want to get in a spot overly speculating on that. I don't have a great idea as it is right now exactly how that's going. There are lots of great ideas on how that's going to look. Having that decided upon, we're still a long way away from that. We've got plans now up to Hoff number 14. So once we get past that point, it's going to be amazing to be standing on the precipice of being able to actually have to answer that question. And I look forward to when we get closer to it.
I hope I live to see the dedication of number 14.
That would be amazing. That will be Freya's Hoff.
So get in on it, you guys. Put some donations in. Let's pay off New York's off.
Let's make it happen.
The race to 14 starts today.
Absolutely. So the next question, can you explain a baby naming ceremony? My wife is having our third daughter within the next few weeks, and I was hoping to do one at some point. First, congratulations. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Excited for you guys. Bodie, would you like to answer that question or start laying that out?
Sure. So what we're essentially doing is a baby naming. Should you have one of the Gothi or Githya, and this guy over here, the Alsheri Gothi, he's done his fair share of them. I know it's one of his he said before it's one of his favorite rituals of our folk to do. I've only married and buried folks officially, so I haven't had the privilege to do a baby naming. But essentially, what we are doing at a baby naming is we're welcoming that child, we're welcoming that soul back to the folk. And so that is the way the bloat is structured. That is the way we do things in the ceremony itself. We're following a little bit of an old tradition of the father taking ownership and recognizing the mother presenting the child to the Godar, to the Gothi in question that's officiating the ceremony. And at least the ones that I've been a part of, there's an element of the father recognizing the child, and we then bless the child and then give the child its name. And there's an old there's some old traditions and some old things revolving that. There's the whole 9-day thing. There was a custom of our ancestors not giving a child a name for 9 days because the belief was that took that long for the soul to attach itself to the child's body. And we still firmly hold to that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be 9 days. You can stand on ceremony if you want, but I know that the Asatru Gothi has done naming ceremonies, baby namings, where the child, you could tell me probably the range. I know that it's been several weeks old, several months old. So it doesn't necessarily have to adhere strictly to that 9-day, but that's the purpose behind it. And that's the intent behind it.
So, couple of things. I looked at where you're located, and I mean, the optimal value is to get a Gothi to perform the service. You're a distance from some of our Gothar, but I think if it's something that you're interested in, it might be something that we could get Gothi Stam to do. I don't know, I'd have to check availability, but I think that he's the closest to you geographically right now. If you can't, it's something that one of our Gothar would be happy to talk to you about and walk you through the steps of. If it's something that you end up needing to do yourself, just you and your family. So there is something really important about naming in general in our religion. Name takes something out of the realm of being an it and makes it a him, a her, a who. It affixes an identity, and there's value in a name. Names have meaning. Why are you going to name your child what you're going to name? Why are you going to name your daughter whatever you're going to name her? And knowing that is an important part of incorporating it into the ceremony. So basically, and this is what I do. This is the AFA's current naming tradition. On the usually, if I have the forewarning, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over myself here because I'm trying to think of where to start depending on people's familiarity. If someone asks me to do a naming for their child, I ask them what they're going to name their child and why. And I think on that, and I ponder that. And then if I have the luxury of meeting the child beforehand, that's optimal, but it's not necessary, just to get a sense of them. Usually the night before I do a naming, I make an offering and I ask for each of our Norns to bestow a gift on that child to guide them, to give them something to focus on, to fix them in time in an auspicious way. And so I'll do that, and I'll draw a rune from each of the Norner, Mother Earth, Verdandi, and Skuld. And I'll interpret those runes. I'll let the inspiration of the gods guide me and interpret those into gifts to bestow upon the child. Bring the baby out. Come before the gods. If you have an altar, if you're at one of our Hoffs, if you're just standing around a circle in a place that's special to you at that time. But call our gods to witness what you're doing, because that's important. Have your friends and family there if they can be there to witness what you're doing. Because a part of it is welcoming this new life into your community, into your family, into your folk. But we're taking them from the realm of undifferentiated space and bringing them into a context, bringing them into, this is your name, this is your family, these are your folk, these are your gods. We're orienting them in time, in space, and in a community. When I say their name for the first time, I sprinkle water on them while I'm doing it. It's a very old custom. That's one of the interesting things, the idea of, and this goes into Catholic christening and other things. In early Christianity, it was a full immersion in water situation that they did, but they adopted our ancestral customs when they came north, as far as, just a little bit of water that they do at a christening. That's the naming that our ancestors did, or it's drawn from that tradition. So we do that to affix the name, and then I have mead, and with a evergreen sprig, I trace those runic gifts that I talked about earlier on the child's head, and I speak that blessing to the folk that are there and to the baby specifically. And as Bodhi mentioned, it's one of my favorite things to do. I am very emotional, and I tear up and cry like a baby when I'm doing it. But that's because I love it. It's one of my most special things we get to do.
Yeah.
So you do that, and then you announce them before the folk, and the people who are there can make toasts to them or give them gifts or whatever that way. And from that moment, that baby's not just a potato, it's a little girl that's got a name, that's got an identity, that's got an orlog and a haminya that she's building and carrying into the future with her. And that's kind of the point of it. Like I said, it'd be awesome if you can get a Gothi or a Githya to perform that service for you. If you can't, then, like I said, please do reach out, and we'll be happy to help walk you through it. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys all joining us again this evening. It's been great to talk with you guys. It's been great to have Bodhi on. And I appreciate all your questions. Appreciate all your participation. I'm sorry for the continued technical difficulties. We will try to refine this process to where hopefully that happens less and less. But yeah, appreciate you guys. And I look forward to, if you guys will join us next week, we're going to start a 4-part series on the Have 'em All with Whit and Svan. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, Bodhi, thank you for joining us tonight. It's been nice to have you on. I've been trying to get you on here for a long time, and schedules just haven't worked out.
Yep.
All right. Well, I look forward to having you back on, hopefully sometime soon.
Let's do it.
Next, all right, we will. We will make it happen. Until next time, hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember that victory never sleeps. Good night, guys.